Good afternoon and good morning to everybody. Welcome to our webinar, How to Get Maximum Value from Your Benchmarking Program. My name is Peter Kimmel. I'm going to be one of the two presenters today. Keith McClanahan is the other. We'll introduce ourselves a little more fully in just a few minutes. Benchmarking has become one of those industry buzzwords, and people like to always see how they're doing compared to others. But benchmarking means different things to different people. And we've discovered over time that what one organization is trying to do when benchmarking is not always going to be the same as what another one wants to do. So in today's webinar, we're going to try to add a little light to all the choices and decisions one can make related to benchmarking to be sure that you are most successful in your benchmarking efforts. We'll have lots of real-world examples with lots of real data, so you can see real, actual data that people have input, and tips to help you along the way. We're also going to have time for some Q&A at the end, and throughout, we want you to take advantage of a chat box that you should see on your control panel, and we will try to answer some of those questions right during the webinar, and the rest we promise we will answer by the time the webinar is over. So, welcome once again. Okay, today's webinar, you're going to learn how to define your benchmarking objectives. So when you start out deciding you want to benchmark, know what you want to do first. That dictates what direction you're going to go. We're also going to learn a little bit about what management wants to see from benchmarking that's perhaps maybe a little bit different from what facility managers want to see. We'll show you how to figure out which type of benchmarking is best for you, because there's lots of different ways to benchmark. We're going to learn about the importance of filters and how they can impact your benchmarking results, so you compare your buildings only to those that are most similar to yours. We'll see how to find the best tool for you to satisfy the needs that you want. We'll see some actual savings that you can expect or count on from benchmarking. These are from people who have been benchmarking for as many as 10 years. You'll see what they've accomplished after 1 year, 2 years, and so on. The other presenter is Keith McClanahan, and Keith is the principal of Facility Issues. He's been doing that for a very, very long time, over 20 years, and they've been doing benchmarking for over 400 of the Fortune 500 companies, different buildings at different times. A ton of benchmarking experience there. And I'm going to turn it over to Keith for a second.
Good afternoon or good morning. I'd like to introduce Peter Kimmel, the other principal of FM Benchmarking. And you can see that Peter's very active in the FM world and well known. He's the automation expert behind the tools we use at FM Benchmarking. And a really significance is he won the Distinguished Author Award from IFMA in 2014.
We're going to show you how to download the benchmarking ebook, which is what the award was won for, in just a few minutes. So today's agenda, we're going to get started, and Keith will be back in just a few minutes. But today's agenda is, the first part of it's going to be how to get started with benchmarking. We're then going to be looking at some examples of actual data, and you'll see what the data can look like, and what people have done with it, and so on and so forth. It'll be really helpful to you. We'll then figure out how to identify what the key ingredients of a benchmarking system are, what's involved in a successful implementation. We're going to figure out or show you what some savings are that people have accrued from benchmarking, and we're going to have just 1 minute at the end about FM Benchmarking as our company. Other than that, there'll be no plugs for our company. We're just going to have a regular professional seminar today. So our first part is how to get started with benchmarking. And don't forget to use our chat box for any questions you may have. So to get started with benchmarking, we're going to start with a definition. Very basic definition. It's a standard by which a metric can be measured or judged. And from that little simple definition, we have a whole bunch of people attending the webinar. If I asked you what that means to you and what you're looking for, you're probably each going to have a very different answer. So we're going to try to figure that out. And one of the first ways to differentiate between the definitions that people have for benchmarking is to differentiate between the terms benchmarking and indexing. Benchmarking involves comparisons. An index is just a statistical measure. So when one comes along and says, what I really want to know is how much people are spending on maintaining buildings in a given location, they're really looking for an index for that location. There's no mention of comparison whatsoever. That's benchmarking. And to really drive this point home, I like to present an investing analogy. And in the world of investing, an index is a number representing a predefined portfolio of securities. You can benchmark your portfolio against an index, such as the Dow Jones Index. That's how you benchmark with indexes. In facilities, an index can tell you what others are spending per unit area. You can then benchmark your portfolio against that index. So in a way, you need both. So what do people spend, as an example, on maintenance per square foot? An index will give you that answer. But how am I doing in my building? Then I want to benchmark my building against the index. So usually indexes are more general, not as applicable to a specific building. They're not as narrowly defined through filters. Benchmarking will give you that granularity that is necessary to be able to make cogent decisions. So, what can benchmarking do for me? These are some of the reasons that we have seen that people get into benchmarking. And it's important to understand what your objective is so you can get going down the right track. So the first one is to look up a metric related to your building. So how much does it cost per square foot for people to maintain, a building to be maintained? That's a most common reason for benchmarking. And the second common reason is I want to compare how my building is doing to others that are similar. Once we get beyond those, though, some people say, I want to not only know that, I want to see how I can use that data to improve my building's performance. We're going to show you examples of that. Another one is I want to justify my budget so that when I apply at the end of the fiscal year to get my budget increased for next year, I've got some reasons and rationale to increase that budget. Same thing with staff. And the sixth reason is whether I should increase or decrease the amount of outsourcing that I'm doing. I know a big bank that just decided to outsource its maintenance operations primarily based on benchmarking data. For contractors, and I'm not sure how many contractors are in our audience today, they have, of course, all the above benefits, but they also have used benchmarking for different purposes, one of which is to show whether their clients are doing better than those better than those who are clients of other outsourcing companies. So that is a good tool to become marketing fodder, if you will, for those companies. Or they can show their clients if they're not doing as well, or in the lesser performing building, so to speak, for them, these contractors can show their clients how to improve. They can justify their pricing and show that others who do as well or better than they are spending actually more than this contractor's clients. And I've seen outsourcing companies use benchmarking as a sales tool before the contract is even agreed upon. In other words, a contractor comes in and says, we're going to benchmark your building at no charge, and you will see how much we understand about buildings and managing buildings and all that kind of thing, and it becomes a sales tool. So I just went through all these, and what Keith is going to do right now is run a poll to see which of just some of these are the reasons that you have coming into this webinar today for benchmarking?
So on your screen, you should see a short poll. You should select one of those options. Which FM area is most important for you to benchmark? And I'm going to leave the poll open for just another moment or so. Probably because I see it looks like we've got about half of the people have voted so far. I'll leave it open for another 10 seconds or so. If you could just finish your selection, we'll give you the results shortly after the session. By the way, while you're voting, please use the chat room, use the questions to the question sessions to submit anything you'd like additional information as we go through the talk. Okay, I'm going to close the poll here in about 3, 2, 1. There we go. Okay. Very good. Thank you. Should be back to your screen, Peter.
Okay. Good. Thank you. Do the results come now, or do we show them at the end?
I've got I can share the results right now. Let me see which. There we go. I can share them.
Share them and describe them. Sure.
Sure. I think that shows up. Does that show up on your screen, Peter, or not?
Believe it or not, I cannot see them.
Okay. To look up a building metric, 21%. To compare their building to others, 48%. Improve the building performance, 24%. Justify the budget and justify staff are both 3%. So the majority of the group really want to know how to compare their buildings to others. Okay. Back to you.
Very good. Okay. We'll move on to the next slide. We had mentioned there is an ebook that I had written called Benchmarking for Facility Professionals. This is available as a free download, and you can get it from one of two places: the IFMA Foundation website, which you can see a link to on the screen, and also the FM Benchmarking website in the section called Learning, and then the subsection called Articles. Either way, you can download this document, and it's a long document. It's 102 pages long, but there's a wealth of information, and it goes into a lot of detail that we're not able to go into in this webinar today. I think you'll find it very useful. Okay, let's move on to showing some real examples from the real world of what people have actually done with benchmarking tools. And we're going to look at examples in several ways. And Keith, you want to go over what we're going to do?
Sure. We're going to talk about 5 examples as we go through the benchmarking analysis. And I want to point out that if you benchmark some of the key performance indices like the utilities, maintenance, janitorial, and security, yes, you'll have almost 95 to 98% of the controllable expense portfolio. However, one of the most important ones that often gets overlooked is the space utilization rate, and you can, as not a surprise really, if you think about it, if you can reduce your space and get the utilization rate up, you can save 100% of that cost as you can get rid of unneeded space. But we're going to look at some metrics on the next few slides and show you some comparisons from current year data.
Having trouble changing slides. There we go.
Okay. A lot of the slides that I'll show you are pretty similar, so let me just by introduction give you kind of the highlights on the chart. We always put the title. In this case, we're looking at total utility cost per gross area. Gross area seems to be the area that most people can readily identify and utilize. We also can have metrics on rentable area or usable area, but gross area, the area to the outside of the building, is a pretty common value that almost everybody has. We got some definitions on what's included in this, so it's consumption, demand, and power factors, and so on. So this is a total utility cost per the gross area. Over on the left side is dollars per square foot, or the y-axis, the dollars per square foot. In this case, it's a U.S. example. If you were benchmarking this in Europe or the UK or anywhere, it'd be appropriate to be in other units of cost, pounds, euros, whatever the currency is. Each individual line, and there's a lot of them on this chart, each vertical line represents a participant in the benchmarking study. The lines are divided into quartiles. So on my screen, which color may not be perfect, the left is the light purple and then blue and then darker purple and green. So you've got the quartiles, and then we've got our building as is the yellow line in the middle of the third quartile. And then kind of to show a dividing line, we have the median as a dark red line across the top, because that's a pretty common management question, on facility management question. It doesn't matter executive or facility. Where do I stand relative to the median? Quartiles are also very useful, but the median is one that we highlight. And then down at the very bottom of the chart, we've got an example. In this example, we've turned on one filter so far, and that's our building's rather large. I don't recall. I think it's in the 800,000 square foot range. So we've got only buildings that are 600,000 and up are shown on this particular chart. So, next slide. Now, all we've done here is it's the same metric, total utility costs, same scale. In fact, important people sometimes think, well, the value changed. No, our building is still the same. It's in yellow, and it was on the previous chart. It was about $3.30 a square foot, $3.35, I believe, and on this chart, it's still $3.35 a square foot. What's happened here is we've added an age factor. These are buildings 21 to 50 years in addition to the 600,000. So we've narrowed the peer group a little bit, and no surprise really. Older buildings have a higher utility cost is the conclusion. Now, in any set of filters you'd want to drive a little further, you might, since this is utilities, you might want to turn on the climate zone. You might want to turn on the shifts per week that the building runs. Any number of factors you could keep looking at to get a more perfect peer group. But I was just wanted to use this as an example as a way to illustrate how choosing the correct peer group changes the performance profile, or the appearance of how your building is performing. And I'd be willing to bet that if we worked a little harder at it, we could probably get our building into the second quartile, into the mid-range of the second quartile. Next slide. In this one, we've taken costs out of the profile. A lot of good comparisons can be made on what's your energy usage per area. In this case, we've got more of the European type of look at it. We've got kilowatt hours per square foot, and instead of BTUs per square foot. Our building, same profile, is running a little bit below the median on the performance profile of the energy utilization. We've turned on just two filters again. We've filtered for office, because office buildings perform differently than manufacturing facilities, medical facilities, hotels, you name it. So office is appropriate, and then the climate zone, hot and dry, is really a driver of the energy utilization.
Keith, what's the year of the data for these buildings?
These are all. This is all 2013 data, and I chose that because everyone's completed their surveys in 13, and as we're near the end of the fiscal year 14 for most people, the 14-year data is still being adjusted.
And we do get variation from year to year, so it's important that you have the year that is relevant to what you're researching.
Okay. Next slide. In this chart, we've got, as you can see, we've got a lot of data. The vertical lines are really very tightly put in here. And we've got corrective plus preventative maintenance. That's simply corrective is maybe goes by the definition of unplanned, and preventive maintenance is planned, pre-planned types of maintenance. Again, U.S. dollars per square foot. And our building's not doing so well in this profile. It's the thin yellow line because there's so many points of data, but it's in the fourth quartile. Not at the end, but certainly not a place anybody really wants to be on a maintenance cost. The only filter we've turned on again here is the 600,000 and greater performance or square footage for the building. Next. On this one, again, we've added just an age profile. Same exact data, same performance. Building's still $3 a square foot. We've moved here from the fourth quartile to the third quartile simply by turning on the age again. So you can see that age has a significant impact on both the utility and the maintenance costs in this sample, and could be considered a key factor. Okay, next. This one's a little different, a way of looking at the data. This is actually a productivity chart, and this is the area cleaned per full-time janitorial worker. Now, this is one of the few charts where the slope of the line is declining from the first quartile to the fourth quartile. We generally view those performing in the first quartile as a better performance, and we've arranged the charts to show it that way. Our building in yellow is pretty solidly in the middle of the first quartile with about a little more than 31,000 square feet clean per janitorial worker. You can see there's quite a variation in this. We only have one filter, or a couple of filters turned on, office, and 8 to 16 shifts a week. 8 to 16 is probably the most common number of shifts we see in any of the benchmarking data, because there's a lot of buildings that run. They've got a 5-day per week operation, but it's still. They may run weekends, they may run extended hours, and a lot of buildings feel like they operate just 5 days a week, but they're in the 8 to 16 or maybe more closer to the 10 shifts per week kind of operation. And you can see again, some of these office facilities, the janitorial productivity is down in the it looks like the worst is about 10,000 square feet per janitorial worker, and that's really not very productive. Next slide. And this one is probably not the last slide I should have put in the deck, but it's probably the one you should start with for most benchmarking analyses, in particular with office space. What's your utilization rate to the gross square feet per occupant? And because if you're in the fourth quartile in today's marketplace, it's really not the place to be. We see there's really not too many buildings that are below 200 square feet. We don't have anybody that's really below 200 square feet per person in the on this graph. Maybe 198 or something. That's pretty tight office standard. The first quartile performance looks like it starts between the first and second. Looks like it starts about 300, and you can see the median value is about 456 square feet per person. Our building is performing just a little bit under the median at about 430 or 440 square feet per person, somewhere in that range. Not terrible, but there could be some opportunities for consolidation and improved productivity. Again, we've only turned on a couple of filters in this case, office buildings and those that are greater than 50,000 gross square feet in this case. So And the size, in this case, size does matter. Some really small footprints tend to have some really high space utilization rates because they've got large core areas related to the building area. So that's a key one when you're comparing benchmarking results. Next slide.
I think we got a survey now, a little poll.
Oh, excuse me, Peter. Okay, let me find it. Okay, this is a poll about which FM functions are most important. Now, in this one, you can select one or more of the following, and I'd like you to please go ahead and do that. We'll allow about 30 seconds or so for you to complete your results. And I'm seeing the results coming in. Looks like we got about 40% of the group have voted. We had just a little more time.
You can pick more than one on these if you wanted to.
Yes. And I'll show you the results in just another, I'll hold the poll open for another 5 seconds or so. It looks like about 3/4 of the people have voted. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to close the poll and share the results. Okay. So FM functions most important to you. Looks like maintenance is 81%, space utilization at 50, utilities at 50, janitorial at 46, security's way down there on the important side, 12%. And I suspect that's because many facility management organizations don't have security responsibilities. Okay, I'll turn it back to the survey or to the webinar.
Okay, thank you. Let's continue now and look a little bit at how management looks at benchmarking differently than just facility managers. And with management, what we find is that they're looking at things at a grander level, a more macro view. And they want to compare buildings within their own company without looking at too much detail within any one building. They just want to see that, hey, here's a building that's underperforming. Let's have the facility manager there look into it. Or comparing their buildings of their own company to those from other companies. That's another thing management likes to do. They like to see dashboards to show all this. And they like to look at trends from year to year. So how are we doing this year compared to last year and the year before? And Keith, you have some charts that I think that you're going to talk about, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Let's take a look at this balanced scorecard first.
Okay. Well, I do some consulting work as well, and this is one example of a balanced scorecard. And I've in the last few years, I've seen many other examples, but they're kind of becoming more consistent and looking more similar as time goes along. Down the left side, on the left axis, are the balanced scorecard factors and things like leadership and planning and customer focus and so on. And I didn't really want to fill this with a whole series of X's in the white boxes because it would look like benchmarking is the end all to key aspect to end all. But so many of the things that you can do through benchmarking are critical and can contribute to that balanced scorecard per factors. Over on the right side, or the blue, the performance criteria are things that our facility management organizations are measured on in strategic planning and communication and organizational structure, whether they have performance measures in place, documentation of processes and procedures, and so on. So you can see, for example, that completing a benchmarking initiative can help you identify areas that could be performed better. understand further the O&M process that you go through. Having the workforce development would be another key component, because a lot of times workforce doesn't understand there's a problem until you start to benchmark things. And of course, a key is measurement. I mean, you could look at, benchmarking is measurement. Again, it goes to so many of these things that on both axes that you can put on a balanced scorecard, that it really becomes a key initiative for almost any organization, and a real help as they look at benchmarking initiatives. Next slide. The point of this one is I started to look at some dashboard KPIs, and there's any number of ways organizations are using dashboards these days, and what's important and what isn't important, and how that gets identified. And just a few quick graphics of how dashboards look. But over on the left side are the KPIs for FMs. And one of the important points I'd make is what's important for FMs and what's important for senior management are really totally different. You have to break the information down, so you've got a cost per some unit measure, per gross square foot, gross square meter, cost per occupant of the utilities, maintenance, janitorial security, waste management, grounds, landscaping, parking, paving, all the components that go into there. Now, if you just did these four, you'd have the vast majority of the cost profile. But those are the only way you can break them down and understand which areas need improvement, and ideally break them down on the individual building performance level. And then finally, it's not a cost, but it's really an indicator of how efficient you are. It's the energy utilization and kilowatt hours or BTUs per area. It's another key way to look at a real significant component of every facility manager's responsibility. Now, some facility managers make the mistake of thinking, well, that's what senior management would be interested in too, but they're not. They're usually just interested in the total operating costs, and they're pretty busy people, and they're interested in a summary of what you've got going, and the fact that you can break it down is useful. And lately, I'm starting to get a lot of requests for the carbon footprint, because there seems to be a increasing environmental awareness of what facilities, how facilities do impact the environment. And so, if you give them total operating costs and carbon footprint, and how the total company portfolio is doing, they're probably not interested in your individual building performance. And it's useful to tell them that you've got the data and you can break it down by that, but it's not too terribly important, and you may lose their attention if you try to go too deep. But what you look like in terms of the company portfolio and how you compare with the outside organizations are really key aspects of what senior management is interested in. Next slide.
Okay, thank you, Keith. Now we're going to move on to a very new, from a technology perspective, a capability or benefit of benchmarking, which is, instead of just looking at benchmarking to see how you're doing, how can we use benchmarking to improve our building performance? And the way we do that is, let's go back to a schematic of some of the types of charts that you saw before. It doesn't matter what the metric is, but this was our traditional chart that we showed you. And you have all the individual buildings here, and then you have your building in the middle of the third quartile, and you find out that your building is not doing as well. It's costing more per square foot than all these other buildings in the first two quartiles. But the question begs itself, what are these buildings in the first two quartiles doing that your building is not doing? In other words, which best practices are these guys following that you're not following in your building? So that's benchmarking at another level, a deeper level. And you can use benchmarking that way and find out not only how well your building is doing, but how you can make it perform better. So we're going to see a little bit of how that happens. So we're going to, by by applying the best practices, we can reduce our costs, we can improve our building performance. So here is just a little bit of an idea of how that can happen, and I'll show you some more data shortly. If we look at 4 best practices related to utilities in this example that we're not doing in our building, but we find out these percentages of buildings that are similar to ours have implemented these best practices in their buildings. So that gives us an idea of what we might look at in our building. And that's a way to use benchmarking of best practices to improve further. So, Keith, do you want to describe some examples in more detail?
Sure, I'd be glad to, Peter. So in this first example, we have utility cost per gross area, and we've turned on just one filter again, 600,000 feet. Our building happens to be in the 3rd quartile in this example. And these are the first 7 of what are probably 40 or 50 best practices that have been identified by our participants. So in the first UB01 or UB01, motion sensors in conference rooms, 74. Our building has implemented this, so it says yes. And our building, the participants in the 3rd quartile, 74% have done that. And in the 2nd quartile, which is the next better one in this case, 84% of the people have done that. So that would look like that's a pretty significant change, about 10%. So that looks like something that should be done if you haven't done it. Motion sensors in the general office space, again, that's got an even higher percentage. That's 12% different. We currently are not doing that, and 80% of the people in the next better quartile are doing that. So that's something that really would make sense, and we should probably do that. UB03, there's this points out the statistical variations in the sample. We haven't done it. 86% of the people in our quartile have done it, but 78% of the people in the next better quartile, which looks like it's upside down. But what's important here to realize is that putting motion sensors in the restrooms is not probably going to affect your overall performance on the charts in terms of your total utility costs. Restrooms are a very small portion of the portfolio and not going to drive that. So probably one you could ignore if you wanted to, unless your building happens to be mostly comprised of restrooms. Initial commissioning looks like a really good one to look at. Again, you can see that it's important. And then going down, if we throw another filter on things, which really is important to try to filter into the right category of our building, we put the age filter on here again, and you can see what the differences in the percentages look like, and they do change a bit. Getting the right profile. So we've got pretty similar, but slightly more compressed on the motion sensors. Not much significance on the restrooms. I mean, it doesn't change much. But you can get a very quick idea, though, from looking at this as to where the opportunities might be to do something that would really improve your building performance, especially when you look at all 40 or 50 of them at one time. Next slide.
Second. There we go.
Okay. Again, just ran a couple of maintenance best practices. You can see from again, we've just got the top 6, and I think there's about 40 in this category as well. So we've got a lot of no's in our building. Again, looks like we haven't done much, and we're part of the sample that makes up the ones that are the opposite of the statistics you see here. So for the first one, MB01, condition index survey, we haven't done that. 67% of the people in the 4th quartile said they did that, and a pretty significant jump even into the next better quartile, 79%. So those are those are pretty significant bumps, and especially when you when you start to consider what kind of things you could do to drive up and improve maintenance performance. Looking at the statistics again here, the biggest spread the biggest spread between the numbers appears to be the maintenance management, the just-in-time material procurement. Being able to get the MB05, it's got a 10% spread on the values, and looks like that would be a key thing to take a look at to improve the maintenance performance, maintenance costs. Looking down again, I just added another filter of the age to see what the difference would be. Again, same answers for our building. We're all no's in this example, and to see if there's any difference in the categories. And maintenance management system tightened up a bit, so maybe that isn't the first thing you want to look at. But I'm sorry, just-in-time inventory spread just a little further, 71 to 82%. So that looks like another key component that no matter how we cut the statistics, might be something that people would want to take a look at and see what they could do about that, improving that. On a look at MB03, electronic handhelds have been implemented for maintenance crews. That's a really significant 56 to 74%. So almost a 20% increase between the fourth and the third quartile on those devices.
What we've learned is that sometimes there is a big jump between one quartile and the next. There may not be between the third and second quartile if we were to look at a chart like that. We see differences between when using different filters, and we're looking here at just a few of the best practices for maintenance. So there's lots of variables, and then they change from year to year as well. As new technology comes along, different best practices are studied. So there's always lots of change. Keith, did you want to add anything else before we move on?
No, I think that's okay, Peter. I've got quite a few questions and answers I'm going to start working on, so I'm going to get those out to people as if they've given them to me here. So keep going.
Okay. The third part of our presentation of the webinar will be to look at the key ingredients of a successful benchmarking system. And the very first one is to get the right tool. So that's where all your data is and everything else. You want to be sure you have the best tool out there. And there's a lot in the ebook on benchmarking about how to pick a tool and all that kind of thing. I'll just go over some of the basics here, and you can look up in the ebook some of the rest. But you obviously have certain metrics you want to study. You have to make sure the tool covers those metrics, whether it be maintenance cost per square foot, janitorial cost per square foot, or area clean per worker, and so on. You want to be sure that you've got the right filters in your tool, so you can compare apples to apples. Make sure that your building can be compared to other buildings that are similar. So you want to have an age filter, perhaps, and so on. You can have as many as 60 or 70 different filters. You don't use them all at once, but there can be a lot of filters. The reports that you have is what give you the data. So you want to be sure you have the right reports that you can access. And you want a system that is easy to use. So you don't have to go to an instruction manual or call the help desk or something like that every time there's a question. And this last one, it's a little bit of a add-on to the metrics one, so I separated it. But for those of you who are looking at office buildings, a general basic benchmarking tool can work for you. But if you have specialized industries or different industries, whether they be retail or healthcare or hotels or what have you, banking, they're all going to perhaps have a few specialized metrics that need to be studied. You'll still get a lot out of a tool if you don't study those specialized areas, but you'll be a lot better off than if you don't benchmark at all. However, if you can get a benchmarking tool that addresses those specialized areas, you will do even better. So as an example, if we are looking at just an office building, whether it be healthcare or what have you, you might just have a few basic items here. That these are just some of the possible questions you may ask, nothing to do with healthcare, obviously. But if you're looking at a hospital, as we do here, you can see that we've added questions on the number of adjusted discharges or patient days, patient visits. They're not relevant to healthcare office buildings. So that's just an example. And then, of course, the reports will be a little bit different as well. Here for the healthcare hospital, you'll see there's a utility cost per adjusted discharge, another for electricity cost per discharge, energy usage, and electricity usage. Those don't appear when you're looking at just office buildings or healthcare office buildings. So that's where the importance of special filters and metrics for a given building type come into play. Okay, so the first ingredient of a successful benchmarking implementation is the right tool. Too many people stop there. They say, hey, we got a great tool. That's all we need. Well, there's something missing. You need to have data. So I've seen a lot of systems with great tools, but there's just a handful of buildings in a database. And then as soon as you apply a few filters, all of a sudden your reports are going to have 2 or 3 buildings left in them. We have found as a rule of thumb, and of course rules of thumb are meant to be broken, that when you are turning on as few as 4 filters, you need about 2,000 buildings in your database. If you want to have 5 filters turned on at the same time, you got to double that, have about 4,000 buildings in your database. So it really grows quickly. Now there are ways to be smart and turn off certain filters that don't have as much impact, turn on other filters. There's workarounds, all kinds of things. Some of that is in the ebook, by the way, so you can look up how to play those games, but you still need a lot of data. But you're still not done, because even if you have the tool and you have the data, you need to have enough training and expertise to be able to interpret the data and know what to do with it. And that is not necessarily simple. It should be, but it isn't. So some of those things you need to know. I don't want to keep plugging the ebook, but they're in there. And then you're not done, because without implementing all the recommendations, you've accomplished nothing other than completed a great paper exercise. So to get your building to actually improve, you do need to take action. And then, believe it or not, there's still one more thing that needs to be done, because the technology does change every year. There's new building products that come out every year, new best practices that come along, and so on. So what you need to do is you have to reassess every single year. So that's what we have found where it becomes the key ingredients for a successful benchmarking implementation. So here are 10 tips that'll also help you get the most out of benchmarking. We've touched on a few of these, but of course you got to make sure that when you establish your goals and objectives, they're aligned with those of the benchmarking tool. There are lots of ways to measure gross area. Well, not so many for gross, but there's several, and lots of ways to measure rentable area. You have to make sure that the other people who input their area numbers into the tool are using the same area measurements that you are, because different area standards can be as much as 15 or more % off from one another, and that can throw way out of whack all the results of the benchmarking exercise. Third, does your tool use medians or averages? We like medians because it throws out the outliers at the beginning and end of your spectrum, like all the charts that we saw there. Averages take them into account, so we always prefer to use medians. You might need to make sure the reports you want are in the tool and the filters you want are in the tool. And is the data valid? Some systems have error checking, and when was it captured? You know, Keith said before the data you saw was from 2013. What if it were from 2012? It could look quite different. Do you want to rely on that? Those are questions you have to ask and find out the answers to. Tip number 7, is the comparison database large enough? We talked about 2,000 buildings being good enough to turn on 4 filters, which can often be enough, but we think that 2,000 buildings is probably as small a database as you want to have in your benchmarking tool. And how do you use workarounds when there are not enough buildings in the sample? So let's say you've got a building in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Let's say it's a hospital. You're not going to have too many other hospitals in Kalamazoo to compare yourself against. But if you're looking at energy consumption, you can find other hospitals in other climate zones that are similar. Or if you're looking at energy cost, you can find other hospitals in other areas whose kilowatt hour cost is going to be similar. Same thing when you're looking at maintenance cost. Look for other buildings who have electrician rates cost per hour for an electrician to be similar. And that way, if you don't have a ton of buildings in your city, you've got workarounds to give you enough buildings for your comparison. You want a tool that is easy to use, and you need to be able to apply judgment, as we talked about before. So those are 10 tips for you. We also get this question a lot: how long does it take to benchmark? And the answer is it can take a little bit of time, it can take more time. It really depends what you want to get out of the benchmarking tool. If you just want to look up a number in an index, that can be done in seconds. If you want to put in some data and compare your building to others, it can take a little longer. You can put in just your total data, like total maintenance cost per square foot, and that's not going to take very long to do that for maintenance, janitorial, and so on. If you want to break the maintenance cost down by the crafts, carpentry, electrician, plumbing, and so on, it's going to take you longer. Do what you need to do. Don't have to put in every single thing. When you digitize your floor plans, the question is, do you put in every little outlet on your walls, or do you just put the partitions down? So go into as much detail as you need, not anymore. You can always come back and go into more detail later on. And the last formal part of the presentation is to show you some real live savings that you can get from benchmarking. And this first chart here is kind of informative. I like it a lot. We're looking at cost savings from those who benchmark. These are real cost savings that people have actually obtained, where they've implemented recommendations that have come out of a benchmarking tool. After 1 year, 2 years, 3 years of benchmarking, 4 years, all the way up to 10 years of benchmarking. Look at the dark green numbers first, only those. And you'll see that these represent how much more savings there is in a given year, like in the second year, above and beyond the savings from the first year. And this line shows the number in the third year above and beyond the first two. So by having this dark green area always be above zero, it means benchmarking is saving some additional money every single year, which cumulatively shows you that there is a big increase over time, as much as 31%. And these are for the median company in this database. Half the companies have done even better. That's pretty impressive. Now let's look at a similar chart, but for energy consumption. You can see again, the energy saved every year keeps additional energy saved each year is always above zero. Your total energy saved from the median company in the database after 10 years, 40%. Again, very, very impressive. And by the way, this number with the green chart, these numbers kept going down pretty much every year. Here they come back up a little bit because energy costs so much, people are being extra careful on cutting back on energy, so they're saving even more. And just a few words about FM benchmarking, and prepare some Q&A, some questions, put them in your chat box, because at the end of this slide, we're going to answer any questions that you may have that we have not yet answered. But just a few words about FM benchmarking. It is a benchmarking tool. It offers 3 editions, as we call them. The first is just going to give you reports. You just look data up, you have nothing to input yourself, and you just get charts. It's almost like index type data of what it is you're looking for. The starter edition, you can get your totals for your janitorial, for your maintenance, utilities, and so on. There's very little data to input, but you do get all the best practices to figure out how you can improve. And our premium edition goes into more detail for each of the various areas, such as the janitorial, the maintenance, the utilities, and so on. It also gives you trend analysis. So, and they're all compatible with one another, as you can migrate from one to the other. You can find out more at fmbenchmarking.com, or you can email us at info@fmbenchmarking.com. Keith, have we got any questions you'd like to answer for the crowd?
No, I've used the time while you've been speaking to answer them. I don't currently see any questions in the list right now, so it'd be a good time if anybody has a question to go ahead and put it in there. I'm all caught up, and I could easily answer some additional questions as you've got them.
Are we sending the recorded version of this to anyone who wants it, or
we will
send it to everybody?
We will send We will send the link of this recorded version to everyone that registered for the webinar. I got okay. John Conlon is okay. Boy, I got a lot of questions all of a sudden. Okay, I'll try to keep up with them.
The ones that are of interest to everybody, let's try to answer them out loud. Just read the question and then answer it.
What are the here we go. What are the filters that you feel are most important when comparing buildings? It depends. I'll take that one if it's okay, Peter.
Yep.
It depends on what kind of metric you're looking at. I think what's important in utilities would be the type of facility. So if it's a office or manufacturing, and then you can subcategorize the manufacturing types or whatever type of building it is. Probably next would be the size of the facility, because that's the overall footprint of the building really does have an influence on how much energy or what you use, and then maybe the age and hours of operation. Again, these are all key components. If you're looking at maintenance, you might want to look at age. If you're looking at utilities, again, climate zone is important. If you're looking at janitorial services, you may want to look at whether they're represented by a union or non-union workforce. Those are again, those are all really top tier filters that people should be able to turn on and utilize as they're analyzing their results.
If your building has some special characteristics to it that you feel are very important and are impacting your bottom line, you'd want to look for a filter related to that as well. Any other questions, Keith?
We got a whole series of thank yous. People look like they liked the webinar. I don't see any other. Let's see. We did get a. My facility is roughly 50-50 office and 50 office and 50 manufacturing. Can you recommend the best way to enter that data? And I would suggest that if you could break the data out by the two categories, that's fine. That would be the best way. If you can't, you should turn on the filter for office, and then turn on the filter for manufacturing, and then turn the filter on for both of them at the same time. And you'll see what kind of influences those have on the overall results. That's probably the best way to get a good comparison between those different types of facilities. And we understand a lot of people do have a mix of office and manufacturing, or a mix of different types of facilities. It doesn't necessarily have to be office and manufacturing, but that's the best way to analyze it.
I see a related question to that, which is when you got several buildings in a given location, should you benchmark the entire group of buildings, or just one building? Try to benchmark each building separately.
Well, if you benchmark the whole portfolio, you really together, you wouldn't know which ones are performing well and which ones are not. It'd really be useful to break the data down so that you could see the individual performances and then be able to start to analyze which buildings have implemented some of the best practices and which haven't, and see how that can affect your performance. To be able to improve the performance of the individual buildings is really the best way.
I guess if they're all on one campus, it really relates to whether you can break the data down and separate the data from the different buildings, like utility data from different meters, and do your maintenance people track by building, or do they just lump everything together? So
Yeah.
the more you can break it down, in our experience, the better off you're going to be.
Better. Yeah.
Any other questions, Keith? Think maybe we maybe do one more, and then we're at the time limit.
Well, we're at the time limit, and I don't. I'm showing that I've answered all questions. What is the source of the data? And is this standard in the industry? Yes. The source of the data is from that we've been showing you is from all of our clients, and it's data that they themselves have put in. So there's the data set really is the user-driven sets of data, and it's as the users input the data, sometimes you can see a mistake, and it's very easy and quick to see someone who maybe has input the decibel in the wrong place, because they'll appear at the very far in right or left sides of the chart. Beyond that, it is all user-driven data. And Peter, that's
it. Okay, well, I want to thank everybody very, very much for coming today. If you think of other questions afterwards, you can certainly email us at info@fmbenchmarking.com. We'd love to tell you more about FM benchmarking if you'd like to know. And I want to thank you very much for your time. I know it's very valuable, and I hope you got something out of the webinar. Yeah. Take care, and thanks a lot.
Thank you.